Welcome to 3D Studio. I'm Mr. Rosen. This is one of Mr. Rosen's videos, and I've done many videos in the past, and I don't have one for 3D design, and I wanted to create this for my students so they could quickly get up and running with 3D Studio. 3D Studio is a 3D modeling program used widely in many kinds of industries. It can be used for animation, 3D scene modeling, object design, industrial design, design for manufacturing, concept rendering for movies or film, architecture, and for 3D printing models. I'll be showing you the most basic methods of modeling shapes so you can begin designing shapes of your own. The last step in the video will be to design a chess pawn. You should follow along with all these steps in the video, pausing when you need to catch up and then continuing on. And when you get to the pawn exercise, feel free to add something extra and change it to be uniquely you. Then add some of the techniques you've seen to the design of your pawn as you want to. We don't plan to print these pawns, but I'll be mentioning some particulars for printing as I go along if it's relevant in the video. Okay, so I started 3D Studio, and this screen comes up, and it's asking you to choose how do you want to start 3D Studio. And there's various ways of starting, and you can kind of see these in the simple menu. And if you've got files that you've already made, it's going to show you the recent files over here, and you can kind of see some things I've been working on. In this case, we're going to just start with the original setup. And so you click that once, and you say New using Select a Template. So this is the basic template, and now we've got access to the just sort of the generic version of how to use 3D Studio. Okay, so now we want to design something or make something, and sometimes this can be a little tricky to figure out. So I always start people off with a cube, and I always go to the Create menu. There's more than one way to do this. In fact, we could do it over here, but I'm not going to. I want you to know how to get to these menus, so I'll be using these menus instead of the others. It's always easy to find these, and if you're not sure about the other menus, you can not worry about them right now and worry about that in more advanced steps. So go to the Create menu, go to Standard Primitive, and Box, and you can see that that's the same menu that's over here on the right, but we're just going to do it this way. Actually, you could navigate to the other menus down here, but we're going to do it this way. So Create, Standard Primitive, Box, and the clicking in here can be interesting, so pay attention to how I talk about what I'm doing when I click this. So the first step is I've got to click, and I'm not going to let go of the button. I'm going to press the button down, and then I'm going to drag. So this is a click and drag and make a square or a rectangle, whatever you want. Okay. And now I'm going to let go of the button, and now I'm going to drag upward to make the square and click again. And now I've got my square. And if I want to rotate this around, I can see all the way around. Okay. Now let's talk about what we can see here on the screen for a moment. What we see in these other three views is kind of interesting, but what are we looking at? If you look in these little circles, you can see that this one says top, over here it says front, and over here it says left. Now really, any of these squares can be rotated to whatever view you want, but we use these specific sides so that we have three axial views, three different axial views. If all of these said top, it wouldn't be as useful for us, and you'll see why in a little bit. So this is the top view, and then here we can kind of mess this one around to kind of check our work 3D, because if we do editing only in this window, we make a lot of mistakes because we just can't see what's going on outside of the axis that we're looking through. Okay, so we could see that we can move this. Now let's say I want to see this just from the front, and I can see the front and the label right there. I can double click that, and it will go straight to the front. But what I really want is the more of the perspective view. So I want to see this little gray corner on the square here. If I double click that, that lines it up perfectly in my perspective view. We'll come back to talking about the perspective view in a little bit. Okay, so we've got a basic shape. We talked about the different sides. And now let's talk about the segments of the shape. Now, this shape right now is just made up of the edges. And we can't see them, but there's also edges hidden in each of these faces, and we'll talk about that later. But right now we can see all the edges on these other three views. And let's say we want to do something different with this shape, and we want to have some detail inside of of the shape. So I'm going to add 2 segments to this one, and I'm going to add 1 to this one. So this object is now 1 segment high. You can kind of see that here. And you can see that it's 2 segments wide. And zoom in there a little bit. Okay, and we can't see those segments over here. So I'm going to add, instead of doing realistic, I'm going to add edged faces. And so now you can see from the front, we're going to have 1 segment, but from the side and from the top, we're going to have 2 segments. And all of that was defined by these numbers here in making the box. Okay, so each of these segments creates another edge. In fact, this is an edge, and this is an edge, and this is an edge. Each one of these little things is a separate edge. And right now, we can't edit those edges. And we'll be able to do that in a moment. Okay, so right now we're looking at the quad view. The quad view means 4 view, and we're seeing all 4 of these views at the same time. What I'd like to do now is show you how to do a couple other things. So first, we're going to zoom into one window, and you can see this beige edge. Whichever window I clicked in last is the one that's active. If I click here, the beige edge moves up here, and now I can zoom, and I'm using the mouse wheel to zoom in and out of these windows. So if I click down here, I can go back in and out like that. And I can also right click in here and do the same thing. And sometimes right clicking is what we want to do because we don't want to lose our selection. But left clicking or right clicking will change these views. Now, let's say I need a little bit closer view than this, and this quad view is kind of small. I can go all the way down here to the bottom, and I can say maximize viewport toggle, and it'll maximize this view to the whole screen. So I click that button, and now I've got a real close-up view of what's going on. And if I want to go back, I just click that button again, and we go back. When I first started learning this, I accidentally hit this button, and I didn't know how to get back. So I was stuck for a while. It was kind of funny. All right, now let's say we get a bunch of these different views kind of screwy, and we really want to have this object in the middle of our screen, and we want to zoom all of them at once. With this default setting right here, we can zoom extents all selected, and this is a selected item. And so when we see if I can unselect it, I cannot unselect it. So it's just selected. It's the only thing there is. So, oh wait, maybe it isn't selected. There we go. No, it's there. So if I want to see the details, I've got to go to the second window. If I go over here, click out, now nothing is selected, so it wouldn't do anything. I need to have something selected, or I could select everything and then do this. And when I select and zoom, I get all 4 things zoomed to their maximum size. Okay, so we could see the edged faces. Let's see. Now let's talk about what is going on in here. But first, I'm going to convert this object, and most often you're going to convert either to a mesh or to an editable poly. All of these have their uses. NURBS is a much more advanced kind of technique. So I always use either mesh or poly. Let's try poly for today. And now it has converted this object into a different way of managing everything on the screen. So if we want to look at edges, you can see that we have vertex, edge, border, polygon, and element. Element is for more advanced objects where we have more than one thing in a group. We don't have that yet. So polygon, if we'll select everything in the same plane, or nope, everything up to the edge. That's right. So if we wanted to select both of these faces, we'd have to click this one and this one. But you can see we can't click 2 without doing something else. So I'm going to hold the control button down and click this one. And now I've got both pieces of this polygon. Okay, now let's look at edges. So here's an edge. Again, I could hold the control button down and click to get the next edge. I could keep selecting other edges if I wanted to, manipulate all the edges at once. But if I just want one edge, I can just click one. All right, vertex and edges are the most important, but vertexes really need to be well understood. And you can see all these little purple or blue points. If I select box, click and drag a selection box around this one point, I just get the 1 point, and you can see it's highlighted in every window. Now, that's cool. Obviously, I could select a bunch of points, okay? Or I could select even a bunch more points. And then we start getting into trickiness about selection, because the selection is including points that are behind these points. So watch what happens. If we click out, none of them are selected. I'll go to the front view. And let's say I just want to select this 1 point. So I click and drag a selection box, and sure enough, it's selected. But look over in this window. In this window from the left side over here, all 4 of these got selected. So it didn't just select this one, it selected it and all the ones behind it. So when you really want to select just one, you've got to just click on the point you want like that. Now there's points behind here, but only this 1 point got selected. So if you're trying to select 1 point, it's usually easier to select it in this sort of 3D view. Let's see if that'll let us do it again there. Okay, we got 1 point selected. Let's just try 2. And no, let's see, did we get any accidental points? We did. Look, we got these 2 points. Oh, no. Yeah, looks like we're good. We just got those 2. All right, let's try it this way, like that. Now we can see we got these 5 on top. I thought we were going to get some behind there. Let's just see if we got any behind. Yeah, you see over here, we got 3 on the ground, on the bottom, back behind there. And now we can rotate this and see we accidentally got these selected. So you just have to be careful in making sure that what you've chosen to select is what you intended. Okay, so those are points or vertexes. Okay, so let's see if we I think we can move on. So now let's move around this, and I'm going to get out and go back to the normal view. This little star just lets us treat this as an object as a whole. It doesn't let us edit the object. So if we wanted to move this object around, we could now. But right now, we're in this selection mode. You can tell because of this blue box up here. So now let's say I want to do the move mode. Now, this is, let's see, can I move? This is the select and move mode. Okay, or I can right click the object and go to move. Either way gets us the move mode. This is the rotate mode. This is the uniform, select and uniform scale. All right, but I just want to move it. So you can see, let's zoom in, and you can see that I get these 3 arrows. If I just click the arrow, I can only move on that axis. And you can see that that's working. If I click the little rectangle or diamond or square, depending on how you want to think about this, you can see that this square selects both this axis and this axis. So now I can move sideways and I could move up. See, it's letting me move 2 different ways. Or if I get this one, I can do it that way. Or if I get that one that's back there, oh, there we go. Now I can move it around, but without moving it up and down in space. You can probably see that a little bit easier in here. So if I'd use the blue one, I can move up and down. Why isn't it moving this one? Because this is the top view. And so the top view doesn't change when I move up and down. But if I move left and right, we get the 2 top ones moving. And if I move backward and forward, we get the 2 left ones moving. And so one of the principles here is that if you want to edit the position of something, rather than editing it in this window, we really want to, I right-clicked there, we really want to edit it in 2 of these windows. So I'm going to move it like this, and then I'm just going to come in here and move it like this. And when we edit it in 2 of these windows, that means we've edited it in all 3 windows, because this has 2 axes and this has 2 axes, but not the same axes. So we have edited the object in all 3 axes. So you don't need to edit in all 3 windows. But you really need to be viewing it in at least 2, which is why we don't usually try and do all of the work by just editing it in this main view, or this main 3D view. So that's movement. Now let's use the scale button this time, which also can be done by right-clicking and going to scale. With the scale, we can choose this middle triangle to shrink and grow the shape uniformly. if we choose one of these other bars, we're scaling it only in that one axis. So here we can make it taller. Here we could make it wider. Here we could make it thinner. Here we could make it wider and thinner at the same time, but the height stays the same because we don't have the blue one selected. So scaling can be very useful. Now let's rotate this. So we'll rotate, and now we get a rotation block like this. We can do it this way, and I guess I'm not sure, but I don't think there's a way to do a combination rotation 2 different directions at once. But you can see now we've got a very strange kind of rotated position for this box. All right, now let's say I want another one of these. So I'm going to go back to selection mode. It's selected. So I'm going to right click, clone, and there's 2 different ways to do this, and today we're just going to do copy. So I hit OK, and now there's another one right on top of itself, and I just want to move it. So I move it. Now I've got 2 of these weird boxes lined up, and they're totally parallel, and I've just moved it sideways a little bit. Okay, so that's how to clone something or make a copy of something. But what if I want this to be mirror image of this? Well, I could clone it first and then mirror it, or I can mirror and have it cause a clone during the mirror. But let's just rotate this one to be the opposite angle, or let's try to anyway. So I'll hit mirror, and it's going to ask me, what do I want to change? Which axes do I want to change? And that is exactly what I wanted. So that's the x-axis. But let's look at what happens with these others. So let's try the y-axis. Oh my, here's the z. Here's x and y, y and z, z and x. None of those are what I want. I really want the x. So now I can hit OK, and you can kind of look and see that it's from the front anyway, it's just exactly mirrored. And you can also see from the top it's mirrored. All right, so that's how to mirror. Now let's say this one's moved off center, and we want these to be at the same level. So we select one, and we set align, and then we click the other one, and then we've got to decide, how do we want to line this up? And I guess center is fine, but it didn't already work, so I don't think it's the Y position. Let's try the X position. No, that's not it. How about Z? There we go. Now it's aligned in the Z position, and we can hit OK and make sure that this is what we want. Yes, this is what we want. So let's see, we've done the mirror and the align and rotate. We got quite a few different tools going on here. So now we've got a few more to do. So I'm going to just delete these and start over with a new block. Okay, we'll create another box, and it's just the same box. Click drag, let go of the button, drag upward. This time though, I want 3 and 3 and 3. So now, oh, and I could define the sizes up here if I want to. But now it's too big for this display. So let's zoom extents all. Well, that should have worked. Let's try that again. There we go. You can see we've got all these shapes, and I'm going to convert this to a poly again. So convert to, let's try that again. Right click, convert to poly, editable poly. And I want to do vertex editing. So I'm going to grab all these vertexes in the middle. You can see they're selected like a belt all the way around. And I want to scale them. So I'm going to right click and scale. And I don't want to scale in 3D. I want to just scale in 2D. You'll kind of see what happens. I'm going to scale those in like so. Yeah, I like that. Okay, now I want to select the polygons on the top. So I can't just click and drag all of them like this because it's going to select them all over the place. So I got to click one and hold the control button down and go around like this. Okay, I've got all the faces selected, and now I want to do a combination of extrude and bevel. Extrude just drags it out but adds a shape to it. So I'm going to do extrude. I click and drag, and it lifts it up like that, and I let go. And now it's still in extrude mode, so I could do it again. I don't want to, So I'm done with this, and I want to back up one step. So I hit Control Z, and I'm backed up one step. Now I want to do bevel. Bevel is very similar to extrude. It starts with the extension the same way. Then when I let go of the button, I can drag to make it go further out or further in. And in this case, I want to go in, and look at that. Okay, now let's zoom extents again. And you see I hit zoom extents while these faces were selected, and it actually zoomed in just to what was selected. So let's back up, go back in here, select, zoom extents all, and now we can see that we have a side view. Now when we go back in there and we go back to poly, it actually remembers the face that we created. So you can see I did this with extrude and bevel. I'm going to show you a little trick, and that is to do the bevel again, but really don't lift it or drop it. Just click, let go, and you can see that it dragged inside there automatically. So I'm going to hit Control Z to back up, and let's watch what happens if I do move. So I'm going to move and drag it up, but I'm going to just drop it back, like back to the same level or close to it. And then I'm going to let go of the button and just slide the mouse and drag the mouse in like just a little bit like this. Okay, now it's still in bevel mode, so now I'm going to go in. This is out. I'm going to go in a little bit like this, and then let go of the mouse and then drag. You can see we could go out, which is a little funky, but I'm going to go in just a little bit. And I'm watching all the screens, like I'm watching the screen up here too. So see how I can just bring it just in a little bit like that. Okay, and now I can get out of bevel. And there we go. So that's kind of cool. All right, now I want to show you how to do a couple of other interesting things before we go on to the pawn design. So this time I'm going to create a standard primitive, but I'm going to make a cylinder. And the cylinder is interesting because it defaults, you can see, to having 18 sides and 5 height segments. 18 sides makes it look pretty much like a circle. It isn't really a circle. It's really 18-sided shape. And let's just zoom in on that. Oh, look at this hand tool. With the pan view, we can click and drag, and we can use the mouse to zoom in, and we can really focus on one area of our project this way. That's using the hand. Okay, now I'm going to go to the sides of this, and I'm going to edit this box. You can see this is for a cylinder, and when I go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can see we're losing some of the sides, and I can go all the way down to 3, but it's still considered a cylinder. The word cylinder is still applies because it's this shape that's been extruded up or down. So you see I can get down to 3. I've never actually tried going below 3. Let's see what happens to the 2. Now it won't let us go below 3. So let's go back up to 6. Okay, so this is kind of an interesting shape. And I want it to, let's see, let me just make it a little bigger. So I'm going to right click on it. I had to right click 3 times to get to what I want. Scale, grab this central thing. Okay, so here we are with this X. I want to make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to grab this middle triangle and just drag it to make it big. You see I can compare scale all the way around. And then I want to move it so it overlaps this. So I right click on it, move, and I grab this, and now I moved it over, and you can see that it's overlapping in a bunch of ways. It's kind of overlapping nicely, actually, and it's kind of intersected all the way around there. Now you can see in these other pictures, I'm going to select both of these actually and zoom again. You can see in the other pictures that the objects still exist inside of each other. And I want to do 2 different things to this. So I'm going to make another one of these by, remember how I do that? Got to select it by itself. Right click, clone, copy. Hit OK. Now there's another one already set up. I'm just going to drag it over to the other side. By looking at these different windows, I could see that I've lined it up the way I want. So first, watch what happens when now I'm going to show you a new technique. Okay, so I select this middle object, and I want to add this permanently to this. So you could see how there's overlapping detail inside here. Okay, so I'm going to combine these. So I go to Create, Compound, and Pro Boolean. Sometimes Pro Boolean works for this the best, and sometimes Boolean works better. I usually start with Pro Boolean and see what happens. So Pro Boolean, and I want to add these two together. So that's one of these parameters: union, intersection, subtraction, merge. Merge sounds right, but it's not. What we really want is union. I want to unify these two shapes into one shape and not have any internal structure. So I hit union, and then it says start picking. So I click that, and now I can click the object that I want to add to it, and it's this one. So I click, and now you can see, especially right here, that it must be this one that we added. So we had this, and we added it, and I mean not added it, we made a union between this object and this object, and now the internal architecture is gone. And so it doesn't look any different from here, except that the color changed because now it's one object. But here you can see that now the bottom is a shared shape. It's the same object all the way around. All right, so I unclick, start picking. Now, what I'd like to do now is I'd like to cut this shape out of this shape. So I've already got this one selected. So I go to start picking, but now I don't want a union. Now I want a subtraction. So I go to subtraction, I'm in start picking, ready, and I click. And now from the above, you can see it cut that big hexagon out of this object. And we can't really see it very well in these two views, but certainly in the 3D view, you can see exactly what happened. So let's zoom in there a little bit and just look at what happened. So over here, this object got added to this one, and over here, it got taken away from it. By itself, these two abilities allow you to model really sophisticated and various shapes using only cubes or boxes and cylinders. The potential is just crazy how much you can do just with those tools. And yet we got all these different menus of different things that we can do for modeling and creating objects in 3D Studio. So you can kind of get the idea that there's an awful lot that can be done here. But we're just going to start with this simple thing. Okay. Next thing, first we'll turn that off. Okay, now we're going to make the pawn. So first we've got to get rid of this object, and then that'll make room for the next one. So we delete that and we go back to our quad view. And now that we're in the quad view, we want to center that because we want to look at it in the side and top views, but we also want to be able to see it in the diagonal view. So now we're going to create a cylinder. And this last cylinder we created had 6 sides, so it remembers that. But we want a cylinder that has, I think 18 sides, 20 sides, something like that, so that it makes it look a lot more round. So we'll try 18. And you can see it has 5 height segments, and we need more like 20. So we're going to change that to 20. And then you can see there's a ton more lines in there. That's going to be really nice for how we choose to model this this particular thing. Now the cap segments mean does this tube, is it closed at the top and bottom or not? And we want it closed, and if you're ever going to 3D print something, your object is going to need to be closed as well, because if not, then it's going to treat the whole shell of your object as a shell instead of as a solid object. Okay, so now we're looking at it in this view, and we can make that bigger. We can see what's going on in there. And let's see. First, we're going to want to edit these as vertexes. So we'll zoom in on this window, and you can see all the grid there, and we want to be able to see it in the other window so we can simultaneously tell which vertexes we have selected. So we go to our vertex selection method, and we select the top row there, and you can see in the top window and in the right window that all those top little red dots show that the top level is selected. We right click, click scale, and now we want to scale those. So I'm going to choose to scale it in the top window so I can grab that particular bar and scale it in and out. And you can see in all the windows those points are making it smaller and larger. But that's not quite what I want to do. So Control Z, and then we're going to go down and we're going to do something super cool. soft selection, you can see the little rainbow points, and that means that those points are selected. They're just not selected at the same strength as the top ones. And so if we go scale those, it's going to scale them differently from the top row, and it's affected by that curve that you can see down there. So now if we scale, you can see it scales the top row a certain way, but the other ones don't, they're not right with it, but it does scale them somewhat. And so we can really make some interesting shapes this way. So let's go Control Z, we'll go back, and we're going to increase the fall off. Right now it's set to 20, and it's 20 units of something. And so now we're just going to hold that top arrow down, and we're going to grow this almost all the way down, but not quite. And then we'll scale it with that top bar again, and you'll see what happens. Here we go. You see it kind of gives us a nice little trumpet or flute shape that's really pretty cool, and it's kind of like the shape of a pawn, but I think we'd like to maybe extend that shape further down. So let's go back, and we kind of want it to go down probably 80% of the height. So let's go back and we'll extend that fall off down even further. And we don't want it all the way to the bottom because we want to have the bottom size defined. There we go. And now it's looking really just like the bottom of a pawn. I mean, below the head of the pawn. So now we'll turn soft selection off, and now we're going to select a different row. And so we're going to do a little edit on the bottom here to make it look like our pawn is like sitting on a kind of a little platform. And you can see when we select them from the side that it selects those points all the way around, and if we scale it, you see we could scale it with the in any window we want. When we scale it on the side, it grew out and went back in, and we wanted to push it in a little bit. And that looks pretty good. So now we want to close the gap down there maybe, or we don't want those slanted lines. We want it to be more dramatic. So let's just stretch those points out a little bit, and you can see it's scaling it up and down now. So the top points go up and the bottom points go down. And that looks pretty cool. And now watch what we do next here. So we're going to select these bottom points, right click, go to move. We're going to grab the green arrow and drag it up to just close that gap off. Now you can see that it looks more like a traditional shape for a pawn on a little pedestal. And you probably want to do something like this for all your pieces, or you know, whatever you decide to do with your other pieces, you can kind of have a stylistic element to it. So now we're going to select these two right here. We're going to do something similar at the top. And routinely in chess pieces, pawns have a little collar. Actually, lots of pieces, maybe all the pieces, have a little collar around kind of the neck of the piece. So we're going to go back to scale. We're going to stretch them out like this. We can go out or in, but in this case we want to stretch them out. And you can kind of see what's going on. And then we grab the top one and squish it down to make it look like a little, not quite like a point, but kind of sort of sharp. And then we'll move those down, and we want to just make the angles a little more dramatic so they kind of stick out like dinner plates. So that looks pretty good. So I think that, let's see, let's just edit this a little bit. Go in there, move it down a little more. Yeah. And that looks kind of big. Let's just make it a little smaller. It's kind of nice to still have those sharp edges, so then we'll bring that top down again. That looks a little more practical. Let's take a look. Yeah, that's a little more subtle than what we had before. Okay, so we have one more step to do here. And so it's pretty obvious we don't have the ball on the top of the pawn. So we're going to get out of this object, zoom out a little bit. We can adjust this back to the 4 panes. Use the hand to move my pawn over a little bit like this. And now I'm going to make a sphere. This is new. So we'll create standard primitives. There's 2 different kinds of sphere. For this one, we're going to go ahead and use it for just regular sphere. Click, drag, let go. There's the sphere. Okay, now the next problem is we need the sphere to be on top of the pawn. And the second problem is we need to be the right size. So first, let's get it up there in the right position. So in this case, we're going to go back to the select mode. We select both objects. And we zoom extents to all. So now we can see both in the whole thing. All right, now we click on the ball, right click, scale. Sorry, not scale. We want to move it. So watch in this window as I grab this and move it up to about where we think it should be. You see now we've got a problem again. So to reset, we can't reset right now. So that's fine. So we've got it about the right height, but we need to edit it in another window. So we right click over here and we drag it over like this. We drag it down like this. And we can kind of center it. Don't worry about it being too picky, but it's kind of centered. Okay, and now we'll left click down here and we'll select both again and zoom extents both. Now we can see that it's actually pretty good. That's pretty much the right size. Maybe it could be a little smaller. I guess I think it should be a little smaller. So I'll left click on this, right click, scale. Let's sink it down to about there. And then up here, we can see they're not touching and we need them to touch. So I'm going to right click in here, move, and bring the ball down like this to where it's inside this outer layer here. So let's just zoom in there so you can see exactly what I mean. Now I want to cover up this piece right here. And this is tricky because when you have round objects, it's hard to know exactly what's going on. But I'm just going to go down until it's covered up on both sides. But we know these aren't really lined up yet. Okay, so we need all of these to be lined up just right. Now, we know that we can align stuff. So let's left click on the bottom like here, and then we go up to align. And now we're going to click on the ball. Oh, no, that should have worked. Oh, I was clicking in the gray square. I needed to click on the green line. Okay, so now we have the alignment ball. Now I'm going to turn off this check mark, and we just want to watch and see what happens from each thing. So let's do X. Ooh, X lined it up here nicely. You can see X turns that off and on. That's good. So we need that one. Let's watch this one now. Does Y fix that? No. Turn that off. Try Z. Yes. So now X and Z lined these up just right. So we hit OK. So we got them aligned. Now we really want them to be the same object. So we're still in the bottom object, and we go to create, compound, ProBoolean. Come down here. We don't want subtraction. We want union. Start picking and click the ball. And now the ball has been clicked. And if we look at it from a side view, you'll notice there's a change right in here where the bottom of the sphere got clipped off down here. So you can see that it's gone. And that's what happened from the ProBoolean. And so that's a good finished product. So that's how to make a pawn. And this is suitable for printing. There's more that we might have to do in the printing software, but it is suitable for printing. So we can go save as. And you just find where you want to save it. And I'll name this Rosen Pawn. I'll probably do 01 because I might want to iterate my design and improve on it. I hit save, and there you go. That's it. Thanks for watching my 3D Studio video.